On 7th of October this year, Israel suffered one of its most brutal massacres. Some may say the atrocities that came to light by Hamas were even more barbaric than ISIS or even the Nazis themselves. Children were killed in front of their parents, people were burnt alive, but the crimes didn't end there. Hamas used rape and gender-based sexual violence as a weapon of war, including sexual mutilation. And despite several visuals coming out in the public, testimonies of extreme torture, brutality, there's been a conspicuous silence from international bodies like the UN on the matter. They've been talking more about ceasefires in Gaza than the October 7 attacks. Hamas's barbaric attack has received very little scrutiny from human rights groups, especially women's groups, amidst the larger war. Until a few days ago, they had not even been specifically raised or condemned by UN Women, the United Nations Women's Rights Agency, which has quite often spoken about the plight of Palestinian women and girls. Apart from condemning the violence by Hamas, the US State Department has put a spotlight on why the ceasefire extension talks failed. A big reason they're giving is because of Hamas's refusal in freeing more women hostages that they have. So this is what the US State Department spokesperson has said, that Hamas refused to release more women and children hostages from the ones they have already agreed to release because of that pause, humanitarian pause and ceasefire. And they believe this is because Hamas doesn't want these women to be able to speak publicly about what happened to them during their custody. He went on to say that Hamas actually broke the deal. The deal was specifically that women and children will be prioritized to be released from hostage. But the Hamas group came up with excuses that weren't really credible. The US State Department is suggesting that they are refusing to accept that there are more women in their custody when the US and the Israeli agencies believe otherwise. Listen in very quickly to what he said.
One of the reasons they don't want to turn women over that they've been holding hostage, and the reason this pause fell apart, is they don't want those women to be able to talk about what happened to them during their time in custody. Certainly, there is very little that I would put beyond Hamas when it comes to its treatment of civilians and particularly its treatment of women.
Now, the UN Women body released a statement condemning these sexual violence only late last week. Even that statement began by saying, and I quote, "We deeply regret that military operations have resumed in Gaza, and we reiterate that all women, Israeli and Palestinian women, are entitled to a life lived in safety and free from violence." So instead of pinning down Hamas, they created equivalence between the assault on Israeli women versus Palestinian women, even though no Palestinian accounts have come to light of any sexual violence since this war began. It then went on to say that we unequivocally condemn the brutal attacks by Hamas on October 7. We are alarmed by the numerous accounts of gender-based atrocities and sexual violence. Note the word accounts here, which suggests that they cannot be taken at face value just yet. And in fact, the next line reaffirms that. The UN Women's statement said, "This is why we have called for all accounts of gender-based violence to be duly investigated and prosecuted with the rights of the victim at the court." 2 months after the attack, and this is all the UN Women could say, that too after much pressure. A day after their statement, on Monday, some 800 people, including women's activists and diplomats representing 40 countries, crowded into a chamber at UN headquarters in New York for a presentation laying out the evidence of large-scale sexual violence with testimony from witnesses. Sheryl Sandberg, the former Meta executive, said at this meeting, "Silence is complicity." Same day, a large protest outside the United Nations headquarters was held, highlighting the sex assaults of women on October 7. There has been a lot of anger against the UN body for not doing enough to raise the abhorrent sexual violence against Israeli women. Could this be because of politics? Because if there was this much evidence, video evidence in public domain on any other case, I wonder if these international bodies would have kept quiet for so long or would have spoken in these terms. And that's the question I'm asking. Is the world deliberately silent on sexual atrocities committed by Hamas? Joining me now, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow of the ORF. I also have with me Major Jay Goldstein, who's one of the IDF spokesperson. Let me begin with you, Major Faye. There's been a lot of questions raised on international bodies and human rights groups, especially women groups, about alleged silence or the failure to raise the amount of sexual violence and brutalities we witnessed on October 7. But why do you think that is the case? Why do you think global bodies are failing to raise this appropriately?
As a woman, particularly, that issue and the silence of these bodies is a personal affront. We ask the same question: why are these bodies and these communities and these institutions that are sworn to uphold the rights of the women silent about not the alleged, the proven, and the very, very intentional assaults of Hamas militants against Israeli women? I return that question to them. Why, if this is your mission and this is your goal and this is what you as an organization are upholding and intending to uphold, why are you silent on this? What makes Israeli women different than any other woman that you have sworn to protect and to secure and to fight for their rights?
Do you believe that this is purely political, that it is politically inconvenient or politically not correct to raise these crimes because there are political angles involved, and that is why this is taking place, even by global bodies that are sworn to protect women's rights?
What has transpired on October 7th was an assault and an attack and a massacre of Israeli men, women, and children. And I think the world at large has ignored that and has chosen to not take a stand with the truth and with what has been going on. They're choosing to ignore what happened on October 7th and what transpired afterwards, the continued attacks of Hamas against Israeli civilians by rockets, as well as the attacks that are happening on other borders. I think it's a big question, and it's something that we are dealing with as the IDF is defending the people of Israel, but also what Israelis are trying to do themselves, which is tell their stories and tell the truth of what really has been going on here.
No, you said these are proven attacks, yet the UN Women releases a statement, that says we welcome inquiries and investigations. Despite a lot of visual evidence available, some shot by Hamas itself, and you've presented it to independent journalists. They have given their personal accounts of what they have seen being done to Israeli women and children. Why do you think these bodies are not taking it as proven accounts?
I think there is a general desire for the world to not listen to Israeli sources, to not listen to Jewish sources, to ignore the words and to ignore, again, the GoPros that Hamas terrorists themselves wore as they filmed this. There is only so much proof, which is the actual physical proof of the assault, that we can bring. We have been showing that in close quarters. We've been showing that to journalists. The world has seen it. That those that have seen these assaults take place have also testified against it and testified what they have seen. And we are just here to continue to tell the world exactly what has happened on October 7th and to continue to fight to defend the people and the survivors.
So, Shansarin, I want to come to you. This whole episode has put into question a lot of women's rights movements and bodies, because so far we were told, believe women survivors, don't question their accounts. But here we've seen a lot of politicians also kind of putting into question the accounts of Israeli women. And some have even gone on to completely deny that any sexual crimes took place on October 7th. It's kind of denting the very women's rights movement and mission.
That's correct, Shivani. And the travesty of this entire debate is that bulk of the footage which has been released, and I'm not talking about the aftermath of the carnage which Hamas carried out. Bulk of the footage is what Hamas guys themselves were shooting and very proudly relaying to the rest of the world. Bulk of the footage is that, where they're talking about, no, let this woman be, don't take this woman because she's going to be a sex slave. Bulk of those accounts are from Hamas's own footage. The rest of the accounts are from some CCTV cameras and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely.
That irrefutable evidence. And yet, if somebody questions this evidence, number one, I'm now not even going after the testimony of the victims of these attacks. I'm just going at the visual evidence, which is so stark. And then, of course, is the point which you raised that, women victims, how can you not take them seriously when they've gone through this trauma? But look, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by these third-rate organizations like UN Women. Most of these are, these are jobs given to women who have never really fought for women's rights. They've done a lot of virtue signaling. They've done, a lot of grandstanding. But when it comes to actually talking about or pushing for or plugging women's rights or protecting them, these people have been found wanting. Tell me something, Shivani. You know, these events happened on October 7th. People like us who don't have access to, we just have access to public domain information. We were horrified by what we were watching.
Yes.
Okay? We woke up to shock of what was happening in Israel. It takes the UN women over, what, 6 weeks or 8 weeks?
Yeah, 6 to 7 weeks.
For them to come out with that goddamn statement, they should be ashamed of themselves. That entire body should be simply disbanded and thrown into the rubbish bin.
No, but Sushant, that's my question. You look at UNRWA, which works in Gaza.
Yeah,
You look at a lot of international bodies and agencies that work inside Gaza. They're suffering a crisis of credibility. For
Shivani,
so long, tunnels of Hamas, misuse of resources into Gaza, and now even this, you know, the fact that they don't shine a light on hostages, they keep talking about a ceasefire, the UN woman doesn't speak for 2 months.
Shivani, there were UN officials who were actually keeping hostages. And these are people, you know, I feel so strongly about it because even I pay, you pay, all of us pay for running this goddamn United Nations. I think it needs to be scrapped for the kind of people they have taken in. One. Secondly, there is a bigger problem that the people you have brought into these organizations are people of a certain ideological persuasion, people, you know, who are ideologically corrupt people. These are people who believe in political correctness. These are people who have this very warped sense of equivalence
and justice.
Even when they are seeing what is happening.
No, and anybody who finds it difficult.
Down to you and me, and they will pontificate and sermonize to us. And yet, when it comes to taking a stand against the
Hamas,
worst kind of atrocities, you find them wanting.
No, anybody who has a problem with not condemning Hamas without any ifs and buts, has a problem condemning Hamas atrocities and sexual crimes without any ifs and buts. For example, a prominent US politician went on a news channel and said, yes, I condemn Hamas rape, but you know, we have to be balanced in our criticism that comes the way of the Palestinians. It's mind-boggling. You can say that. I want to go across to Major Faye one more time. The US Department has said that one of the reasons the extension of the ceasefire couldn't happen, those talks failed, is because Hamas is willfully not releasing more women in their custody. What can you tell us more about this? How many more women are in custody of the Hamas, and why do you think they're refusing to release them?
The operational pause broke down because Hamas continued to fire rockets and broke the operational pause on Friday morning by firing rockets at Israeli civilians. There are still 137 Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. I'm not going to go into the details of how many of them are men, women, or children, but we are still doing and upholding our efforts to, again, maintain the 3 central missions that we are focusing on right now, which is to bring back these hostages, to completely dismantle and destroy Hamas's capabilities, and to ensure security and safety on our borders.
All right. I leave it at that. I do thank Major Faye Goldstein and Sushant Sareen for joining us. A big question mark really on these international bodies when it comes to standing up for what is right.